Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to our monthly tech talk for March of 2015. This is our second attempt to give this tech talk. We had some issues getting things running yesterday, but hopefully things will be all right this time, and if not, we will record it and post the video up on the site. So this is a special tech talk because we actually have 4 guests with us today, all focused around the same subject but looking at it in different ways. It's focused on view debugging and Xcode, and what this is about is, as you might know if you've been developing for iOS for a while, sometimes you have a bug or a problem or something you're trying to figure out with your apps, and just looking through your own source code isn't good enough. So you need to know this technique of view debugging to look at what's going on with your views or your auto layout constraints and so on, and that's what these guys are going to teach you about today. We're going to start out with Scott Berrevoets, who will be talking about view debugging in Xcode with its built-in tools. And then we'll move on to Erik Kerber, who will show you how you can go even further using a third-party tool called Reveal to do even more advanced things to inspect your own apps. And then Derek Selander will show you how you can use Reveal to inspect third-party apps. And then we're also joined by special guest Oliver Jones, who works at Itty Bitty Apps, the makers of Reveal, who will tell us a little bit about the history of Reveal and help answer some Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, if you are watching this live, you are welcome and encouraged to submit questions as you have them, and you can also see other people's questions and upvote them. If you're watching this on the Google Hangout page live, then you'll see a little button that looks like a grid of 9 squares. If you click that, that'll bring up the Q&A tool, and you can go ahead and ask your questions and up those others. Definitely keep them coming. Most of the questions we're going to keep toward the end in the Q&A period after the presentations, but if there's something really relevant, I might interrupt the presentation and ask it right away. Usually these tech talks run about an hour. Because we have 4 presenters, this one might run a little longer, might be more like an hour and a half. Each presentation will be about 15 minutes. So let's dive into things. We're going to start with Scott Berrevoets, who is a tech editor on our site. Scott, he's also a tutorial writer on our site too. He works at Lyft.com, and he has a penchant for making open source controls. So now I'll turn things over to Scott for his talk on view debugging with Xcode. Scott?
Thank you very much, Ray. Yeah, so like Ray said, I recently worked on a tutorial for the site that goes into view debugging in Xcode. And I am just going to show a couple slides, and then I'm going to dive right into a demo that shows you how one might use Xcode to debug views. So there we go. Okay. That's one screen. There we go. So view debugging in Xcode. Before Xcode 6, this was a lot more difficult because all you had at your all that was available was a simple recursive description, which is a private method on UI view. This will print a complex and pretty unreadable description of how your view hierarchy looks. And so an example of what that might look like is this. So you have all these views. They are somewhat, or the hierarchy is somewhat clear, but you can't really tell. There's no visual indication as to how views are positioned relative to each other or relative to their superviews or something like that. So yes, you can tell what views frames are and how they can be interacted with or not, but it's not terribly useful. So then Xcode 6 came along last year, and Apple introduced live view debugging in Xcode. And what that is it actually is a visual way to debug your views that you can. That's a lot more useful because you now have all kinds of insights that you previously did not have. So what's an example? Well, so first let me get into what it brings more than it did before. There's no setup required, first of all, so it's just right into Xcode. That's not different, but it's important to know.
Hey, Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are there supposed to be slides right now, or are we looking at Xcode right now?
Slides.
Okay, I see Xcode here.
Okay. Does the play function in preview not work normally?
It works. Just make sure when you go to screen share that you choose entire window or entire desktop and not a particular window? Did you do that?
Yes. Let me
Okay.
try that again.
Do you have multiple monitors? Because right now I see Xcode.
No, just one. Let me try screen sharing again then one more time.
Okay.
Okay. How about this?
I see it now. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks for the heads up. Okay, so you didn't miss too much. I was just going over, maybe I should go back to this slide. So this is the slide I was talking about before. There's not much information here. You can see frames, and you can see other properties, but there's no visual indication. So this is not terribly useful for visual persons. So then the new way is live view debugging in Xcode. And what I was saying is in Xcode, there's no setup required, which means you can just build your app in Xcode and click a button and it'll work right away. You don't have to attach any other kind of apps. Reveal is a little bit different. I'm sure Erik will go into that a little bit later, but this is pretty straightforward. So you can interact with your own views, the views that you create and are part of your app, but you can also interact with system views, which are UI toolbars and UI navigation bars, tab bars, stuff like that. You can inspect view properties much more than the ones you just saw in the textual hierarchy. So like fonts and font sizes and text colors and stuff like that for labels. And you can actually manipulate views at runtime as well. And on top of that, there's also auto layout support. So any constraints that you have added to your views or that are part of your view hierarchy, you can inspect and see how they built your view hierarchy on different devices. So with that, I would just like to show you a demo of this because a demo is worth 1,000 slides, so I'm just going to dive right in. And for that, I'm going to use JSQ Messages, which is an open source control that Jesse Squires wrote. It's pretty much a copy of the messaging app on an iPhone, and so I think it's complex enough to actually, have some meaningful debugging going on. So I'm gonna just push via storyboard, and I'm not gonna look at any code. So I'm just gonna collapse this, and I'm actually gonna just hide that altogether. So this is what the app looks like, very similar. I won't go into too many details as to how it's built, but we can actually see that once we start debugging. So I'm going to do that right away, and I'm going to use the menu for this. The button down here also works, but it's clearer if you use the menu. So you can go to Debug, and then View Debugging, and then Capture View Hierarchy. And so you'll see the console show up, and this is showing up again too. So I'm going to hide all that and focus on the main content here. So I'm going to zoom in, and you'll see that most of the view hierarchy here is duplicated. It's the same as in the simulator. And so what you can do is you can just kind of drag the canvas around and see that you actually are looking at a 3D model of your entire view hierarchy. So this is really useful if you want to figure out, well, is this view covering some other view or is this behind it? And so you can easily see here that, for example, the bubble here is behind this text view, which makes sense because the text you want obviously in the bubble. So what else can we do here? Well, first of all, there's a lot of noise here. These first screens here are just kind of filler views, windows, layout containers, stuff like that. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I can use that slider here in the bottom right corner. I'm just going to drag the left thumb over to the right, and you'll see that views start disappearing. And I don't want to remove everything, obviously, so I'm going to remove up until the collection view, which is what this view is based, what this whole control is based on. So you'll see this is still a view controller rep review, and then this is probably the normal view. By the way, I see that up here in the jump bar. So the view that I've selected now is actually the collection view. It's a custom collection view. And so this is about as far as I want to go in filtering from the left. I can also filter from the right, and I can just do that by dragging the right slider. And I'm just going to filter out some views here. This seems about right. There's still quite a bit of noise. And I can remove that by turning wireframes off. So the wireframes are just borders around all our views that kind of give you an indication how views are positioned. This is mostly useful when views are transparent or don't have much content, and so you can still see how that view is actually laid out. So how do I do that? Well, right now wireframes and contents are both enabled, and if I want just contents, I can just select that, and so now it's a lot more focused on the actual content of this view. And so now I can actually, so you notice that I was in a perspective before. It's kind of looking at it from the side as opposed to the front, like you see in the simulator. So I can go back to that by pressing this button in the center here, which is the reset. It's the reset viewing area button. And if I then zoom out a little bit, which I can do with these buttons, I'm using a trackpad, so it's actually easier to just use a pinch gesture. But you can use the trackpad here, and this equals button here is lets you go to the normal zoom level, which is a little bit too much on this resolution. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and you'll notice that you now have a very focused part, or your view is very focused on what really matters here. We just want to find out a little bit about how this view might be built by Jesse. So you'll notice that in the simulator here there's a picture showing, and that doesn't show in the View Debugger. So what gives? Well, it turns out that this button right here, there it goes. The tooltip says show clip content, and you might know that in order to get a rounded view like this, you use a mask on the layer of that view. And so for that to work, you need clips to bounce on your UI view. So if I turn this on, you'll see that all your clip views are now showing as well. And this applies also to the labels. If I zoom in a little bit, I can show you better. To this label and this label, these are the sender and text labels, or sorry, the sender and timestamp labels. And those are only showing, or those have clip content as well, because they cannot exceed the bounds of this view. So they have clips to view, or clips to bounce on as well. So what can we do here? Well, since this is a normal view debugging session, we can actually just interact with views as you could in a normal debug session. So for example, first let's look on the right here. We have a UI image view here, and we can actually see that this image view is has this normal image, and then highlighted there's no image because you can't select this image. However, if we look at the avatar here, say Tim Cook's avatar, you can see that if we click on that, there's a different highlight image. And so you don't have to actually dive into your code or anything to look at what this highlight image might be. And that can be very useful if you are unfamiliar with a particular part of your code base, or you're completely new to a code base. And so you can just do this instead. Just look at the View Debugger and tell from there. In addition, and now I'm going to open the debug navigator, which I think is command 6. Yeah, there it is. So just command 6 opens the debug navigator, and you can actually tell if you expand the process here, that you can actually see an entire view hierarchy of this view by expanding the right views here. So I'm low on space, but you can see that this collection view has a header, which is the load earlier messages button. You might be familiar with, and then there's outgoing and incoming cells, which when I select those, they actually show up on the canvas as well. And so some really cool tricks you can do with this is if I open the console, I can I have this view selected now, this outgoing cell, and so if I just, for whatever reason, this is not very practical, may not be as practical, but it goes just to show what you can do, is if I select the memory address here and I go to the console, I can actually use an expression to remove this view altogether. So I just say remove from super view. nothing happened because, well, the process isn't running. It's actually paused. So if I continue running and then switch to the simulator, you see this view doesn't even exist anymore. Now, how can I get that back? Well, I could re-add it to the subview, but there's probably an easier way. That's just that actually shows a little bit more about this feature. So I'm going to find my collection view. There it is, and pick that memory address and say reload data and continue, and you'll see there it is back. So obviously this example is not, it goes to show what you can do very well. It might not be the most practical, but I've used this myself in a lot of cases where I just want to get rid of some noise views and some views that overlap each other, and then just re-add them back after I'm done debugging. And so that's the demo I had to show for you. I think that concludes my part for Xcode View Debugging. It was a short demo. I've written a tutorial which should be coming out soon on the site. And so, well, I'll stay around for any questions you might have. And I think I'll turn it back to Ray then.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. That was really good. A nice little tour of what's available in Xcode. And before I get into the next part with Erik, I wanted to address a question that came up from one of our viewers, Asuru Nanayaka, who was asking, basically it's late where he is, he wants to know, is this going to be recorded and posted up on the site later? The answer is yes, these talks are always recorded, so it will be on YouTube later. And so now we're going to move on to the next part, which is from Erik Kerber. And if you thought what you just saw in Xcode was cool, wait till you see Reveal, which is a third-party tool. And Erik's going to be covering Reveal 1.5, which is the latest version that just came out, and some of the new features that are in Reveal 1.5 as well. So Erik is also both a tech editor and tutorial writer on our site. He's actually the tech editor of SwiftBy Tutorials, for those of you who've read that. He's the lead iOS developer at Target, and he enjoys outdoor activities like running, cycling, rowing, and fishing. So now I'll turn things over to Erik for the second talk of the second part of the presentation on view debugging with Reveal.
Great, thanks, Ray. Just want to say I'm going to give a short talk on Reveal. I'm actually really excited to talk about this. Reveal is a tool I feel like I've been using my entire iOS career, even though looking back on it, I don't think it's actually been released as 1.0 for that long. But you will see some parallels with what Scott just showed. There's a lot of features that are similar, but also with Reveal, there's also a lot of kind of really cool additional things you can do, which I'll be going over shortly. So let me get up and get a quick little presentation where I'll sort of go over what we'll be talking about. First off, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction. That'll be the really short slide part of this, and then I'll go into some live demos similar to what Scott showed. First off, Reveal itself, it's like Ray mentioned, it's a third-party app. It's made by the guys at Itty Bitty Apps, which are based in Melbourne. It's a view debugger, much like the Xcode view debugging tool. The thing I like to think about is it's very similar to if you're a web developer or have ever done web development. It's kind of like Safari Inspector, the Chrome developer tools, and those are the tools that let you traverse the DOM, manipulate the DOM, and really get into sort of how your UI has been constructed. Because it's not integrated in Xcode, it actually is another app you have on your Mac, and it connects with your application via Bonjour, and that requires you to add a little bit of a framework to the application as well to get it to communicate. The integration, fortunately, is pretty simple. There are three methods they advertise. The first is dynamic loading, and so you can actually integrate Reveal using a DY-lib. And so this is a mechanism if you really want to control, during runtime when it's loaded. But more likely, you probably don't care about that amount of control, so you use static linking using a framework. So you use that when you want it to be easy, or if you want it to be really easy and use CocoaPods, they also do provide a pod where you can integrate it from there as well. A quick overview of kind of the tools you have to work with. There's three major panes. It's very similar to Xcode, where kind of like Scott showed you, the left pane is your view hierarchy, where it's a tree view with collapsible nodes that show each UI view in the total view hierarchy. there's a center pane which sort of renders it in 3D what your view looks like. And the right pane is a collection of what they call inspectors. Now, the inspectors are very similar to the right pane in Xcode, where you'll have things like the identity or the attribute inspectors, where you can see the, suppose you have a UI label, you can see the text value or the font color, or maybe the frame and bounds of it. And what's really cool about this one is that you can modify these in real time. Now that's of note, and which I'll show you later, because in the Xcode debugger, when you hit the View Debugging button, you actually do pause running. So, like Scott said, you can invoke the remove from superview command, but then you have to resume execution for that effect take place. Whereas in Reveal, this all happens sort of in real time. And then the one really cool feature I'll go over then again is debuggable constraints. Now, this is something they introduced just in 1.5. And it's extremely well done. And before I go into that, kind of just so we know what we're looking at, they color code these constraints. So if you see a blue constraint, it's something applied by the system, meaning something you didn't specify in interface builder or in code. And now these things can be like the intrinsic content size and stuff that you don't set explicitly. The purple ones are the ones you actually set. So if you pin the width or height, those will be color coded in purple, and those also are editable in real time. So I'm going to quick transition over to my demo. Now, I have running in my simulator the app Artsy. Now, Artsy is a app in the App Store.
Hey,
it's actually
Eric,
made
it's
by...
back to you. If you could share your screen again so we can see Xcode.
Oh, sure. I'm assuming this one. How does that look?
Yep, I see the screen.
Cool.
I see Artsy.
Cool. And minimize that. So yeah, this is Artsy. It is an App Store app. It's actually made by fellow tutorial team member Orta. And another reason I really like to use this one as an example is it's actually open source. So you can actually go onto GitHub and open up I believe it's under Artsy called Eigen, and actually run and debug this yourself. And this is also the app I'm using in my tutorial on Reveal that'll be coming up shortly. So I've actually already gone through and added the framework to Artsy. And so the basic flow is I have the Reveal app up, and in this drop-down right here, because it's the framework has been integrated, it actually, Artsy does appear in this drop-down. So if I just select that, it'll communicate with the Reveal framework and sort of light up the Reveal UI with the Artsy app. Now, much similar to what Scott showed you, you have sort of in the middle here is a rendering of the app itself, and has the called the wireframe mode or the content mode only, or if you can have both at the same time, right here. And in the center pane here is also a 3D rendered view. So where one of the reasons I love using this Artsy app is if you look how it looks to the user, you can see a simple splash screen with sign up in an account. But if you actually grab the middle view and drag it to 3D, you can see there is a lot going on in the screen. Now, this is why this is really cool, is you can see things that are rendered in your app that you would have no idea are there if you just looked at the app itself. So, like I mentioned, this is all real time. So, suppose I were to go to the Artsy app and actually hit this login button on the bottom right. Now, it does go to this login screen, but it doesn't immediately show up in Reveal. But even without pausing running, you can hit this button in the top right, which will actually refresh the view and then redraw the hierarchy as you see it in the app itself. So I'm going to go back quick and refresh one more time. So the real-time part is really useful. I'm going to take this center label here, which as a brief description, suppose I suppose you're a developer or you're working with a designer, and you wanted to see what it might look like with a different font color. In this inspector tab on the right, you have a lot of sort of properties of the current view you have selected. For instance, you have this identity inspector, which says this is a class of type AR serif line height label. You can go over to the attributes inspector, which gives many Xcode-like properties laid out in a similar way as well. So if you start at the bottom, it starts off with the top of the class hierarchy with UI responder, and actually gives you properties of every class type as you go down the class hierarchy until you get all the way up to the UI label. Now, if I take the color here, property, and actually change it to red, you'll see the label is actually updated in real time. Now, the really cool part is if I go back to the simulator, you can see that actually updated instantly. So, if you wanted to get some design just right and you had a really slow code debug and kind of inspect cycle, this can speed that up pretty considerably. So that's cool. And as I said, there's the ability to debug constraints, which they just added in Reveal 1.5. Now, if you remember, I mentioned that there's blue constraints and purple constraints, and you can see these show up on any view I selected. So if I select this button here, you can see a new set of blue and purple lines show up that represent what Reveal calls participating constraints. So if I go in the layout inspector, which is also on the right here, this has kind of like an interface builder, your frame, your bounds, and a lot of other layout properties, but it also has a section that goes over the participating constraints. And so participating means any constraint that affects this view itself, and so that can be either constraints that this view owns or constraints that the super view owns and operates on it. So suppose you want to debug some of this stuff. Now, before I go into that, you might notice that this view is kind of noisy. These are actually pretty hard to see, and there's a lot of stuff going on back here. So you kind of want to get rid of those. You just want to focus on the views you want to look at. Now, if you remember Scott in his demo, he showed the ability for Xcode to have a little slider that would filter based on the left or the right, which I believe corresponded to the bottom of the view hierarchy or the top of the view hierarchy. Reveal takes a slightly different approach. You can actually, if you see as I scroll over these views, they get highlighted. Now, there is one view sitting over everything right now, which I believe is something set by the system. So I can actually twist this to the side. I want to grab this view. And you can just double click on a view, and it will change focus to that one. That's actually not the one I wanted to grab. Let's instead go on the this label itself. I can double click that one, and it'll actually remove everything else from the screen and just give you that view and all the subviews. Now, also like Scott's tutorial, there is a breadcrumb trail at the top, so you can actually say, I actually want to grab the one that's just outside. So I'll point to one more up that view hierarchy, and it'll show just the view that contains this label and everything around it. So let's take a look at these constraints. As you can see, there's a few app-defined ones, meaning the width and the height, those are purple, and then the center X and center Y. So when this was coded, this was pinned to the center, obviously. It also pinned the width and the height. Now, this is a pretty narrow screen, so you might think, maybe you want to use more of the screen. Maybe this is designed before the iPhone 6s came out, and so you want to use more of the screen to show it. So you can actually click on one of these constraints, and the constant, meaning the constant of the width constraint, is editable. So right now I'm actually debugging this on a, I have to remember myself, yes, it is iPhone 6 Plus. So we have 414 points to work with. So let me try changing that to 380. And you can see I actually changed the constraint in real time. And so now this label is wider than it was when when the app first started. Now that didn't have as much of an effect as I thought it would, so let's actually try another screen. I'm going to go here to the...
Hey, Eric, I'm going to jump in with a question that's relevant from one of
Sure.
our listeners.
Yeah.
He says, earlier, just a second ago, you showed us how you can double-click a view to see just one view in its subviews. How do you go back again to see all the views?
Oh, yeah, sure. So there's a couple ways. They actually have a navigator on the top left here. And so if you do something and you kind of just want to undo that, you can hit back. And you can see I went back to the old way I went to. But suppose you want to go all the way to the top. On the top, the breadcrumb trail on top here, you can pick anywhere in the view hierarchy you want. And so if I click on the UI screen, which is the top, it'll actually bring back the whole view.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And
there are
actually,
also lots of there are also lots of keyboard shortcuts for this stuff as well.
Yep. And actually, before I refresh, there's actually one other cool thing I want to show. So, like I mentioned, this screen right here, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Now, the reason for this is because this is actually a modal screen that was presented with something called, it's new to iOS 8, called Modal Presentation Style Over Full Screen. And why that's cool is because before, if you presented a modal view, it would actually hide or the views behind it would disappear, whereas in iOS 8, they are still rendered, behind the top view in real time. So even though this view is visible on the screen, I can grab this image view right here, double-click on it, and I have that now as my context. So you can pick anywhere you want in the view hierarchy and check that out in real time. So we'll go back to this screen. Now this one's interesting because this one, it's a bit more obvious that it sort of doesn't use the full width of the iPhone 6 Plus, including what looks like a segmented control up here on top. So what I can do is I can click on one of these to get some context of where I am. Now, when you click on a control or a view, it'll actually highlight over here in the left pane as well. And the left pane will tell you that, I've got a UI button here. There are 3 UI buttons. And these all live inside of something called an AR switch view. And so maybe I want to take this and make this the full, not the full width of the screen, but use a bit more of it. So I scroll down and I can see that this actually has a width pinned to 279. Now, let's use it more. There are 414 points and set that to, I'm kind of making up a number here, 380. And that will actually snap the whole AR switch view to the width I just declared. And if I go back in the simulator, what's really cool is now you can actually see what the screen would look like should you have actually made that tab view wider. Now compare that to trying it out in code and doing the code build debug cycle. That would have taken quite a long time, whereas now you can try that out in real time. I believe that's what I wanted to show. So I think I'll throw that, at that point, I'll throw that back to you, Ray, and I'll be, again, available for any questions anybody has following up.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, Eric. That was really cool to see a nice little overview of Reveal, especially with Artsy, where there's so much going on. Before we get into the next part of the talk, I'm going to answer one more question from Niraj Kumar, who's asking how can we be notified beforehand about these talks? Well, the best way right now is to go on the sidebar of our site where we announce the next talk, and you can sign up for it there. But you do have a good point that we need a better way to sign up, like a mailing list or something, so that is something to consider for the future. All right, next, there's more Reveal, and we're going to get into, if it wasn't clear to you, what Eric just showed you was looking at an open source app where he had the code, so he instrumented Reveal into the project himself. But sometimes you might want to be curious how a popular app, say something Facebook wrote or something, implemented something with their app, and you might want to use Reveal to debug a third-party app. Believe it or not, that is possible, and Derek is going to show you how that works. So Derek is also a tutorial team member on our site, and he is currently working at GoDaddy, and in his free time he enjoys surfing, playing classical guitar, and eating bacon, hopefully not all three at once. So now I'll turn things over to Derek.
Cool. Thanks, Ray. So I am that guy right there. I'm Derek. I work at GoDaddy, as Ray said. So yeah, I want to talk to you today about Reveal with third-party apps. So apps that you don't have the source code. So I'm going to first talk about. I'm going to have a couple boring slides for you. We're going to hammer through those. After that, I'm going to get into 2 demos. And depending on how fast and how nervous I am, we might have time to, I might take a request for any app on my phone that you want to see in Reveal. But we'll see how much time we have. All right, so let me share my screen. All right, we good to go here?
Looking good.
Alrighty. So, as I said, Reveal on third-party applications. The large majority of this stuff is going to be done on jailbroken devices. There's a cool little trick I'm going to show you in a second to use Reveal on the Apple's simulator apps. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But the large majority of this is done on jailbroken devices. And so I think 8.2, you can't jailbreak it yet, but there is talk about being able to do it soon. So just keep an eye open for that, because just as developers, jailbreaking it definitely helps in debugging. So yeah. All right. So it got quiet all of a sudden. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So why inspect other apps and Reveal? So the first superficial answer is that it's cool. It's you're kind of like the party trick person. An actual good answer is probably you can learn new things from exploring other apps. It's 99% of the time you could confidently say that someone has tried or has dealt with the same problems that you have. So being able to see what another person has done is just incredibly insightful. And the final thing is, I'm a developer. I have a bunch of questions on UI and UX, like how you should arrange views and all that. And I think being able to do this is a pretty good Stack Overflow alternative. You get some crappy questions from Stack Overflow sometimes, so being able to see, like how the heavyweight apps like, Facebook, Twitter, anything from Apple, how they go about doing something, it's pretty insightful. So we're going to start up. Just going to do a quick talk on how to attach to one of Apple's simulator apps. So to do this, we're going to rely on the dynamic library that ships with Reveal. So how do we do this? So first, we need to hunt down the process name for the application, and we'll get to that in a second. And then after that, we attach LLDB to that. And when I say process name, let me jump back to that. You could either do the process name or the process ID. You can attach either way. So once you do that, you call the code needed to load and launch Reveal. And then after that, you just resume the program. So I think when this talk is done, I'm going to give Ray the code needed to be able to do this, but you can see it in the screenshot below in Terminal. And so here is just a quick overview of the bundle identifier to process names. So let's take a look at photos. So when I'm hunting down something, I'm not searching for photos. I'm searching for the name mobile slideshow. So that's the thing I need to attach to. It's going to be different than the bundle identifier. All right, now onto a demo. And let me set up my windows. Okay, and then we'll do a new screen. All right, so let's start photos. Good. Let's start LLDB. Process, attach, name, mobile, slideshow. Show. Cool. Now let's load reveal. Good. Launch reveal. Good. And so I have those set as command aliases. So let's take a look at how I'm doing that. So load reveal guy is I'm loading the dynamic library. And then the launch reveal is I'm calling the code needed to start the notification. So let us continue. I already have it on here, but let's launch it again. So I don't have the source code, but I can now attach to any of Apple's iPhone simulator apps and see how they went about doing stuff. So I think Scott was showing this a second ago, but let's say I want to play around with the view controller. Let's go to that. So process interrupt. Cool. PO this guy. All right, there's a view controller. Let's do let's do set editing. Yes. This up for you guys a bit. And then animated, yes. And then and keep an eye on here and see what happens. Continue. Cool. So I have direct access to the code, and most importantly, I have access to the heap addresses, because that's when playing around with this stuff, that's the most important thing. So cool. So that's that. Quit. Now let's look at my phone. I have a jailbroken phone that I need to reflector. Okay. And bear with me as I hook it up. All right. So this is my actual phone. This is live. Oops. So we're going to play with Twitter. So actually, let's look at Twitter right now. So something I was really digging about Twitter was if you've looked at it before, it's got kind of a nice kind of scroll view thing where it's on most tab bar controllers you kind of have that more button, but here they're grouping three things together for home, discovery, and activity. And I always really like this control. It's well done in my opinion, and I just want to know how they did it. And so you could go about this several ways. You can you could have a scroll view with your subviews. You could even do like a navigation controller with a custom transition coordinator. I just wanted to see how they did it. So with the jailbroken device, what you do is you stick your dynamic library into a certain directory, and that directory will, whenever an application loads, it'll go through and launch all these dynamic libraries. So I have access to Twitter now, and hopefully it will load somewhat quickly. Seems to be taking its sweet time. Yeah, we can work with that. So home view controller. So that's a strong hint that this is the home. This is the discovery one. So let's just keep on jumping up in the subviews and see where we're going with that. So we got home table view. So jump higher, hit test. No. Swipe scroll view. Okay, so cool. So just using reveal for only a couple seconds, I was able to figure out that by clicking on this, it looks like a view controller, and the view controller's view has been added to a scroll view for a parent view controller. So with reveal, you can kind of figure out how certain apps have done kind of complex things really easily, and it's a tool I really like. It's definitely super beneficial for kind of exploring other applications.
Derek, can I just jump in for a second there about the speed?
Certainly.
The speed, you're just connecting to your phone over Wi-Fi, yeah?
Yes, and well, actually, so a couple other things too is I have Reflector on, which is definitely slowing it down. Just in case, I'm also attached through SSH on my phone, so I have so the slowness is not reflective on Reveal. It's on my phone.
Yeah, you can speed it up by using a wired connection over USB, by using
oh, cool.
A personal hotspot. If you set up personal hotspot over USB, you get a lot quicker than just using Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi generally, for most apps, it's efficient.
Very cool. That's I will definitely bug you about that on further details. But yeah, so that's pretty much it on my end. I think I made some pretty good time. So if you want to, we can look at take a look at. Is there any apps that anyone would be interested in seeing? We do Facebook. We can do. Ray, do you have a preference?
How about if anyone's watching and wants to see something in particular, shout it out, or ask it in the Q&A tool. While we're waiting for people to have a chance to shout out an app they might want to see, I did have a question I'm sure everybody will be curious about. Say someone wants to do what you just showed us how to do, Derek. After this talk, will you be providing any kind of cheat sheet of instructions or something to get people started that we can link to the show notes or anything like that?
Yeah. I can. So the biggest thing is you have to jailbreak your phone, and so it's kind of tricky to. Apple closes the window. So what happens is, let me give you a concrete example. So 8.1.3 comes out, and what they do is Apple will then close the doors for being able to upgrade to 8.1. So when that happens, the jailbreak community will only have jailbreaks for 8.1. So you kind of have to time these things and hold on to that version until the jailbreak community figures out a new a new security issue in order to do that. So like I said, the 8.2 should hopefully be coming out, but you just have to keep an ear to the ground on this kind of stuff. And so once that happens, I can provide a couple links I'll provide a couple links for that. But the most important thing is jailbreaking.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we have a few requests coming in, and one I've seen. Once somebody recommended, and two people from the team here is Springboard. So can you show us that one?
I hate to put someone on the spot, but the 1.5 version of Reveal does not work with Springboard. I have an older version of Reveal that, gosh, I hope it's still on here. But yeah.
We could pick a different one.
Sorry about that, but
okay.
Yeah, it's working on other ones.
Okay, let's see. Another one that was requested, somebody requested Threes and somebody requested Facebook Paper. Do you have either of those on your device?
Yeah, or Facebook Paper, I need to set up my hotspot, but that takes about 10 minutes to load. Let's see, do I have Threes? So Threes, I think, uses, oh cool, I do have it. Okay, so that uses OpenGL, so that's not going to be super interesting because you won't be able to see the content. But let me just do it anyways. So screen share. Okay. You see me? Am I good?
Yeah.
Alrighty, and then Reveal Threes, and then let's look at my phone at the same time. So this is the actual live thing going on. I probably shouldn't be reading it around.
Using Unity. It's just one big Unity view.
Oh, cool. So the front screen doesn't look like it, but yeah, okay, cool. Man, you called that out. So yeah, and
what does that say down there? It's hard to read here.
Sorry. Unity view.
Unity view. Okay.
So with Reveal, I typically use a tool called Script, Cycript, and that's kind of, so I use Reveal for only a couple seconds, get the memory address, find out something in particular that I want to explore, and then I use Script to print out all the methods, print out all the instance variables, play around with the code. So that's my typical workflow when exploring stuff like this.
Okay, awesome. If we have time later, Derek, maybe we'll go through a few more because there was a couple other good requests out here. But I
Cool.
think we better. Do you have anything else, or are we ready to move on?
I'm good to go.
Okay, well, awesome, Derek. That was really cool. I could have happily spent another hour just on some of that stuff, but that was great. So now we're going to move on to, we're actually done the presentation part, but we're going to get a chance to talk with one of the developers of Reveal, Oliver Jones, today. I had a few questions for him before we dive into the Q&A. And the first thing I wanted to ask Oliver is, for those of you who don't know you, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, and in particular, like how you got into software development, and then how you got into iOS and OS X development, and then finally how you ended up working at Itty Bitty Apps and on Reveal.
Right, okay. Well, I got into software development back in the 90s as a teenager. And since then, I've worked in a variety of industries. I've been self-employed, a freelancer. I've worked in the games industry on console games. I've worked in the finance industry on equities trading, all sorts of different things, many different languages, from low-level C code and DOS to assembly and .NET and C# to Perl and Python and PHP and I forget them all. And now, more recently, iOS with Objective-C and a bit of Swift here and there. I started doing iOS development in 2009, just on the side while I was still working as a .NET developer. And then I went to first job in 2009 and got addicted to the Apple platform and iOS, and then started working at Itty Bitty Apps in 2010 as a first employee, and started having ideas about building Reveal in 2011.
Yeah, that actually leads me. That leads me into my next question. So, how did you guys come up with the idea behind making Reveal, and sort of what's the history of how it started?
The idea, well, the owner of Itty Bitty Apps, Sean Woodhouse, and I were on a United flight to San Francisco in 2011, and we started talking about tooling and things on iOS. And basically just sort of maintain the state of development tools. Having worked on other platforms, I was familiar with other IDEs, from the other IDEs like the ones that JetBrains make, to just web development tools like Chrome Inspector, Safari Inspector, and also because of my history in game development, I actually worked in tooling for a Melbourne-based game development studio. And it's just so obvious when you work in an industry where you're working with tools like Unreal, or even back then Unity was just being created, or not just being created, but it was starting to be used. And even in developing your own tools in game development, you just find out that without them, nothing happens. Like when you have a content-heavy industry like game development or 3D art, like movie production, without tools that are good and allow really fast iteration and quick debugging and analysis, it's so unproductive. You end up spending so much time just in the debug cycle. They're very important on game industry, especially with C++, because C++ can take a very long time to compile. We were working, like when working in C++, it can take 10 minutes, half an hour to build an app. So quick iteration cycle is really important. And that's kind of where Reveal came from, or was inspired by. It was just the ability to quickly iterate, to be able to edit things, see things in real time. Heavily inspired by things like Chrome and Safari.
Okay, great. And so right now, I know Itty Bitty Apps, I know you do contracting, and I know you do Reveal, but I don't know too much about, Are there full-time people working on Reveal? Do you have a team of people working on Reveal, or is it a part-time thing? And where's Reveal headed in the future? Any light you can shed on any of that would be great.
So yeah, we do have people working full-time on Reveal. Tony Arnold, one of the maintainers of the Magical Record, is probably have widely known. He works exclusively for us on Reveal, and because of our contracting business, any developers who are not currently involved with an active contract are generally working on Reveal. But as a rule, we have just one guy working on it full time.
Okay. Awesome.
And going forward, we want to carry on, progressing it and continue to develop new versions. We've got lots of ideas for version 2. It's just the things that constrain us are really just our availability of resources to apply to it. And certainly, having customers apply encourages us to carry on developing. But part of the reason for developing it was also scratching our own itch, and using it ourselves. So I'm sure we'll continue to, even if we had no customers buying us. But fortunately, we do, so it's great.
Okay. Anything specific you can share in terms of future features that might be coming to Reveal?
Nothing right now. We are a little bit in a holding pattern for debug. We're working on any bugs that have been identified in 1.5, and we certainly have a lot of ideas about what we could do, things like the view controller, containment, hierarchy, things, the other parts of UI kit that we don't currently support very well, like flight kit and theme kit. There's a whole litany of areas that we could go in, or directions we could go in. We actually would really, really like to find out how people are using it more. We have a little bit of analytics built into the app, so we can see what people are clicking on, from a feature perspective. But we really want to know what the community of users or just the wider community will find useful. Because you can, as a developer, you can think, this would be awesome, but maybe no one uses it. You want to know how your customers use it.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually something I want to get into later after we get some questions from our listeners. But before we get into that, say one of our listeners has a good idea for a feature or wants to tell you how they're using Reveal. How do they get in contact with you guys? What's the best way?
Well, they can access our support website, support.revealapp.com, or there's just in the help menu in Reveal, there's a submit feedback option that just fires up a mail message and an email to us. And you can also contact support@revealapp.com.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Oliver. We have some more questions for you, but at this time, we're going to get into some Q&A from some of our listeners. And the first question looks like has the most upvotes here is going back to sometimes Erik and Derek were showing changing some things inside Reveal. And the question is there any way to push the changes you make inside Reveal back inside the code in Xcode? I don't think there is a way, but I'll let you guys answer just in case I'm missing something on that.
I can answer for Reveal, and it's no. So if you make a change to a constraint, you're going to want to go back in the code itself and make that change yourself.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question, this one isn't directly related to your talks, but I'll let one of you guys take this one anyway. And it's from Benjamin King, and it says, can you discuss a little bit how you can take a crash report from Apple and symbolicate it in Xcode?
Ooh. Well, you use the... there's a convoluted process. I probably couldn't go into too much detail myself right now here. Anybody else go over that briefly?
Sorry.
Not a clue.
Okay. So it's a little out of the scope of this discussion, I suppose, but one way you can do it is there's third-party tools that make this stuff much easier. There's one called Crashalytics, for example, that you can integrate into your apps, and it'll send you emails and gather statistics on all the crashes that happen in your thing live. So if you're looking for an easy way to do it, that's one way. Maybe someday we'll put a tutorial out there to help with this question. Okay, the next question is from Deborah Stacy. And earlier, Derek was showing how we could use a jailbroken device to take a look at the view hierarchy of different apps with Reveal. So her question was, is there any way to guard or block from that kind of thing being done on your own apps?
No. There's obfuscation techniques, but Objective-C, like, we're going in the Swift era, and, all the tools right now are designed for Objective-C, but with Objective-C comes your C function, object message send, and that's your instance of the class, or the instance of the object, and then your selector name, and then the variable amount of arguments. So it's very easy to hunt down this stuff. It's if you kind of want to guard against it, you should look at you might need to get good at assembly, because it's unfortunately this is just how the game is. It's you can't really do much.
You could always do your whole app in OpenGL or Unity. Like
there we go.
There we go. It'll just be a flat layer with everything already rendered.
Yeah.
And that's actually a perfect transition to the next question from Ken Walker, who says, can we use these tools to debug views in SceneKit and SpriteKit? And the answer is no, because it's built on top of OpenGL. So it's going to be just like that example Derek showed you, where it's just like threes, where it's like, okay, here's the OpenGL view, and then it's kind of invisible what's inside that.
Well, that's kind of correct. But also, I mean, if you use SpriteKit and SceneKit, although Reveal doesn't support it directly yet, it is possible still to warp your entire scene graph and get information out and render the scene in a certain way. It's something we've thought about in Reveal, but because it's kind of a niche, well, SpriteKit been around for a couple of versions. SceneKit is only available since version 8 of iOS. We've thought about it, but it's adding a lot of additional complexity to Reveal. But maybe something in the future. If people are really keen for it, it's certainly something we could consider doing.
Yeah, so I guess at least not at this time, but maybe in the future if Oliver and the folks from Reveal want to bless us with that. Okay, so actually the next question is something I had for everybody. And it's, you guys, I thought, did some neat examples of showing us how you can use view debugging in Xcode, and then Erik's for one of your own apps, and then Erik did the same thing for like Artsy, and then Derek said how we could look at third-party apps. But what I'm curious about is if each of you, maybe we can go through in turn, can tell us in practice how have you used these techniques in your day-to-day job to actually solve some kind of problem. If you could tell us what the problem is, why you use this technique, and how it made your life easier in an example you could think of. And why don't we start with Scott?
Yeah, so recently I've been working on a feature in the Lift app that is actually, well, I can't say too much, but it required modification of a lot of different view controllers in our own app, some of which I had never seen before. I'd seen them in the project navigator, but not actually seen them, seen any of the code or even know what they were. So one of the things that I would do is I needed to modify something, and I would just start a view debugger in Xcode and click on the view that I wanted to modify, and just look at the hierarchy. So what is the hierarchy of these views? And based on that, I could usually, if views are named correctly or intuitively, then you can easily figure out, okay, the class name of this view is this, and so you could easily jump right into Xcode and modify what I needed to modify. And I've been doing that a lot over the past week or so.
Okay, awesome, perfect. How about you, Erik? How have you used some of these techniques?
Yeah, there's two big benefits to it. The first one is kind of like I mentioned, the design time stuff, where I've actually had a design over and said, here's this cell, but here's what it looks like if I type in, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and you can actually, see that the text looks like in real time. For the debugging part, I can think of one case where, we had two collection views that were literally right on top of each other, and they were both hooked up to the data source and the delegate, so it was basically dequeuing double the cells. And so when we have reveal, we're actually able to see both those collection views sitting on top of each other, even though the user could only see one of them. So just seeing everything that's going on behind the scenes is kind of a really big benefit.
Great. And Derek, how about you? How have you used some of this?
Okay, so a concrete example is about a month ago, I wanted to know the kind of official way to present a login flow. There's a lot of bad comments on Stack Overflow saying, in your view to load, present your navigation.
Are people with me? Did we lose Derek here?
I think we lost Derek.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to Derek's answer here, but we'll move on to Oliver. I was hoping you could answer how you've heard your customers using Reveal.
Our customers using Reveal. Actually, our customers don't tell us how. That's what kind of my question was. We need more information from our customers to how our customers are using Reveal. They're using it for the things that we designed it for, inspecting their apps and trying to find bugs in their view hierarchies and
or stack.
And they're also using to navigate apps or code bases that I'm familiar with. By snapshotting a screen, you can quickly see all of the different view controls and views, and then search your code base for them. For my own work and our consulting work, the way I've used Reveal the most is for those sorts of use cases, but also a lot of the ones that were alluded to earlier about sort of prototyping changes. If you've got a view and you're like, well, what would happen if it had more content, or maybe the designer is asking, well, what does it look like when the things are left aligned, or we move the frame around, or stuff like that. And I can very quickly, a little bit harder in a highly constrained situation with order layout, but certainly with such a frame-based layout, you can very easily and quickly move things around on screen and show a designer or a product owner, this is what it would look like, and prototype things quite quickly. There are limits, obviously, but it's very useful in that respect.
Great. And actually, I'll share a personal use of Reveal too. I was working on a scroll view video tutorial series for our site, and there were a couple times where I was trying to get something working and it wasn't working as I expected, so it was really handy to just pop up Reveal and look at the scroll view and see what the bounds of it were and see what the content offset was set to, and then be able to play around with that and get it working the way I want. And I actually found it was a useful teaching tool too, to explain to people what a scroll view is and how it works, to have Reveal up there and show them what's going on. Got a little bit under the hood too. So I'm sure everybody has their own ways of using it, but it definitely can be handy. And so my next question, I'll open the floor to whoever wants to answer this, but let's have a comparison between Xcode's built-in view debugging and Reveal. What are the advantages of Reveal over that? I know Erik touched a little bit on it, but I want a definitive answer on it.
Want me to take this one, or anybody in particular? I think Reveal is, to be blunt, it's much more well done, at least at this point in time, by quite a large margin. The constraint debugging tools, I know Xcode does have it, but I don't think I've been able to even make it useful to me, let alone understand what it's telling me, whereas Reveal is insanely intuitive. That and the real-time aspect of it is another one that really sticks out to me, where Xcode, you do kind of have to pause the entire execution of the app and then change some stuff or look at it and continue on with it, whereas Reveal, you do that all in real time.
I think my main counter argument to that I mean, we're not defending any particular app here, but I think that the main advantage Xcode's tool is that it's free, it's built in. Might not be a big problem to a lot of people, but having to hook up to a separate app might be extra a threshold. But otherwise, I would agree. Reveal is generally much more fluid in its ways, and while Xcode is a good basic View debugger, I think Reveal can do more generally.
Anything you want to add to that, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean that's basically how it is. I mean, Xcode provides a very basic bit of features. It's not super intuitive. It's often wrong. Like complicated apps can look very strange and not rendered correctly. And sometimes the inspectors on the right don't show you the correct values either. Like for the few values that they do show you. Yeah, the way we try to make Reveal is a comprehensive, accurate, as accurate as you can make it tool. For a professional developer to use, and we don't. Although it's not free, we don't think the price point is prohibitive. And I think that any user who uses it and their app would know that it's saved them time. It pays for itself very fast. So yeah, we're really trying to make a professional grade development tool. And while it's a little bit more difficult to integrate, once you set it up in your workflow, it's no more complicated to use or harder to use than the Xcode debugging tool. But yeah, you sort of have to think ahead a little bit and say, okay, how am I going to integrate it? And you can either do it with a static library or a CocoaPod, and that's quite easy. But for the more advanced Xcode users, there's a couple of additional ways using our dialog to inject it, so you don't have to have it integrated into your project or your source code, change your source code anyway, either through environment variables with the simulator or with debug breakpoints in Xcode. Yeah, so
okay.
It's a little harder to integrate, but way better product in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Yeah, and if you use CocoaPods, it's really easy, so it's not really a big deal. All right, and then Derek looks like he got disconnected, but it looks like he's back, so I want to give Derek a chance to answer that question because I was curious to hear his answer in terms of how you've used some of these view debugging techniques to solve practical problems in your day-to-day job.
Okay. So I've always kind of relied on the heavyweight apps to kind of guide me on the best practices. So about a month ago, I was wondering, a concrete example, a month ago, I was wondering how to best implement a login workflow. So, a lot of bad answers on Stack Overflow will say, hey, in view to load, present your modal, or, present your navigation stack or whatever, and that kind of makes the view hierarchy a little unstable. So I was wondering how to do that, and looking at, like Twitter or something, you take a look at how they go about doing it, and so they actually have a host view controller, and in that view controller you have the child view controller, and so that host is there the whole time just maintaining the state. So as the user logged in, yes, no, okay, present the appropriate view controller. And so just kind of seeing that and being able to, check out different apps, because Twitter they spend millions of dollars on their apps. They have better developers than me, so it's just good to see how it's properly done.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. All right, we have time for one more question, so I'm going to answer this one from Luis Suarez, and his question is, when will we have Reveal for Swift? Maybe I'm wrong, but my impression was Reveal doesn't care what language that it's in. Am I wrong about that?
Nope, that's right on. Swift, Objective-C, it's all the same to Reveal.
Okay, great. So good news, Luis. Already works. All right, so we're going to wrap it up there. So I just want to say thank you again to Scott, Erik, Derek, and Oliver for joining us today. I thought the presentations these guys gave was really cool and educational, and thank you so much for joining us, everybody.
Thank you for hosting.
Okay, so remember, if you're curious to find out if we're running another Tech Talk and when it is, just check the sidebar of our site. That is where we are currently announcing those. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Tech Talk, and we'll see you next time.